Welcome to this week's episode of the Readout LOUD, a weekly biotech podcast from Stat. I'm Allison DeAngelis.
I'm Adam Feuerstein.
And I'm Damian Garde.
It's Thursday, February 29th, and here's what we're going to talk about this week.
The biggest craze in biotech finance is raising money through what can be described as legal insider trading. We explain the rise of PIPE financings and why not everyone thinks they're such a good idea.
We'll also discuss the latest news in the life sciences, including a banner month for biotech stocks and the latest twist in obesity research.
All that after a word from our sponsor.
Hey, Read Out Loud listeners, Bob Herman here, Stat's Business of Healthcare reporter and the writer behind the newsletter Healthcare Inc. Healthcare Inc. is a weekly newsletter devoted to unpacking the business and secret inner workings of the U.S. healthcare industry. If you're someone who has ever received a medical bill, or craves in-depth policy explainers, or loves a playful meme now and again, I highly recommend you check this newsletter out. Learn more at the link in this episode's description. And now, back to our regularly scheduled programming. Thanks.
So guys, happy leap year day, February 29th. This is like an extra podcast, right?
I mean, sort of. We do it weekly, so it would be March 1st if this were...
I guess that's true.
Let's call it an extra podcast. I think that's fair. Sorry,
I'm trying to I'm making it fun, you know? It's an extra podcast. It's the leap year podcast.
I'm trying to remember what the cultural, surprises are that can happen around leap year. Do we...
I think leap year should be like the purge day where you can do something that you normally shouldn't be allowed to do every 4 years.
In many ways, that's what this podcast is for all three of us.
Yes, indeed. Well, okay. To keep this a little unhinged, Adam, Damian, I'm going to ask you both to give me your best biotech is back, baby little statement.
Oh, you want us to...
I want you to sell it. We're excited. Biotech is back. Sell it to me.
So you want like a DJ voice?
Yeah.
Something. Yeah. Biotech is back, baby. I probably blew out speakers. Yeah, that's not very good.
I'm so much more comfortable.
Yeah, come on, Damian.
With the sad intonation of the newscaster pivoting from the cat in the tree story to the, colossal tragedy story of biotech is back. But it is, or let's...
it's having another moment. This maybe is how the way that we should, because it's fleeting, and we should have a disclaimer, right? That once we say that biotech is back, tomorrow, right, all things fall apart.
We cannot guarantee that as you listen to this, biotech is not in fact once again departed. But at least as we speak, the closely watched XBI Biotech Index is having a massive February. It was up just 6% on Monday alone. It's up 14% for 2024. This, of course, follows a dismal 2022 and a volatile, largely negative, but toward the end positive 2023. And I think what's notable about the February moment for biotech, if in fact it persists into March, or even if it doesn't, is that unlike the uptick we saw in the fourth quarter of 2023, that one I think was largely tied to inflation and macroeconomic things and a notion that, rate hikes were coming to an end and interest rates might actually be reduced in 2024, which would be good for sort of risk on sectors like biotech. In February, at least as far as I can tell, and certainly this week, the reasons for biotech's outperforming the broader market is actually biotech specific. Companies had good data and things happened that suggested that the sector was relatively undervalued during all of its underperforming days, rather than just it moving as a basket of stocks along with whatever the Fed was saying.
What a concept.
And it's also noteworthy, Damian, that this is all happening in the absence of M&A. Right? I mean, we had this sort of flurry of M&A late last year and in January, and everyone thought that was going to lead to just, a regular, almost weekly announcement of acquisitions. And it really hasn't happened, right? We haven't had a big deal. So that's also kind of interesting, because I think that's something that people often look at as kind of a triggering point for a rally in the sector. But, it's been doing that without M&A.
So then what do we attribute it to? There have been I wouldn't go so far as to call it a resurgence of biotech IPOs, but certainly the so-called window has cracked open more than it was in 2023 so far. And everything that I'm hearing from the startup side indicates that more biotechs are, very seriously putting, their S1s, they're printing them out, they're getting ready to hand them over to the SEC. What else would you guys attribute this surprise February to?
Well, obesity, right? It's always easy. It's always good. It's easy to fall back on obesity, right? We had, to Damien's point, we talked about this week. We had the data from Viking Therapeutics, which has an early stage obesity drug candidate, which had some positive data, and I guess. I think maybe opinions sort of differ on how good and how strong those data are, but it's certainly in the ballpark of kind of the Zepbound like efficacy, right? Of the Lilly obesity drug. So here's a biotech company developing, sort of same the GLP-1 class of drugs, and it looks really good and look really promising, and it's remarkable what that has done. I mean, if you just want to talk about stock prices and Viking, I mean, that drug, Matt, our colleague Matt Herper wrote about the first data from that drug about a year ago. And the company was worth about $700 million back then. Today, as we record this, and I'm looking here, that Viking is now worth more than $9 billion.
Wow.
With much of that coming this week. And that just shows you, again, as we've talked on this podcast before, just how much investors are obsessing over anything obesity related and bidding up the value of companies with anything related to obesity.
Yeah, I think that's an apt point. And we also, at Stat, updated our, I'm going to do a little plug, updated our obesity trial tracker this week and actually dove into a related area that my colleague Elaine Chen wrote about, that a lot of obesity treatments are starting to have ripple effects elsewhere, particularly in the MASH field. Almost a fifth of obesity treatments that are in development are also being treated for the fatty liver disease, MASH, previously known as NASH, and they are dashing into that field of development. I'm firing myself for that pun. But then that also culminated this week. We had some exciting MASH data from the Danish biotech Zealand Pharma and the German firm Boehringer Ingelheim about a phase 2 success in MASH. So there is certainly traction in the weight loss and relateds field.
Yeah, and that drug that you mentioned, Allison, is kind of a sort of obesity-like drug that looks now might have an impact on liver fibrosis or liver scarring in MASH patients, which is something that we haven't seen with other drugs yet. And it's there's not a lot of details about what that drug does, and there's some sort of specifics about the way that they studied it, which might make hard to compare. But again, yeah, I mean, it's just more of the same, right? And then I think that's contributing to what we're seeing overall in biotech.
So one facet of biotech's resurgence is that we've seen a lot of companies that previously may have struggled to raise money owing to market conditions, raising hundreds of millions, in fact, billions of dollars in 2024, but they haven't largely been doing it the old-fashioned way of a stock offering where you get some bankers to basically flog your shares to potentially interested investors on the open market, but rather through a not novel, but newly popular, I would say, mechanism called a PIPE, a private investment in public equity, which comes with a lot of interesting nuance. Adam, you delved deeply into the many nuances and kind of emerging controversies in this world. Tell us about PIPEs.
Yeah, PIPEs. As you said, Damien, these are really kind of interesting hybrid sort of financing vehicles that have been, like I said, have been around for a really long time. Old folks will sort of will remember them as kind of being the way, it's sort of a last resort type of financing that sketchy companies used to raise money. They've been more mainstreamed these days, and particularly in biotech, the wrinkle with PIPEs now is that that's sort of the variety that's out there right now is essentially called like a wall cross pipe. And what that means essentially is that these transactions, like the secret sauce of these transactions is the sharing of material, non-public information between the companies and the investors in these pipe syndicates. And these investors are mostly hedge funds and mutual funds. So they get access to material, stock-moving information, under sort of confidential terms, and in exchange, they help these companies raise money. And we have seen just a ton of pipes this year already. I mean, they started really picking up last year, and it kind of got on my radar screen because you saw more and more of them. So I started tracking these pipes and put together a spreadsheet. And as of yesterday, there had been about 30 of these pipe transactions in biotech that had raised a cumulative total of more than $4 billion. So we're talking about a lot of money being raised in these pipe transactions. And it's really certainly for like the development stage biotech company. So, kind of that early mid-stage company that don't have products on the market yet, that are certainly need a lot of cash to develop whatever drugs they are developing. This has become kind of almost the preferred way of raising money, as opposed to kind of the traditional follow-on equity offering in the public markets, Damien, that you alluded to. Wait,
why would that be advantageous compared to a kind of classic follow-on, stock sale?
Yeah, well, I should note, and I said, the secret sauce here, again, is this sort of sharing of material, non-public information that happens. And the question is really why is that allowed, right? I mean, isn't that insider trading? I mean, how are you, I mean, and in certain examples that have happened this year, I'm talking about companies raising money and, and basically sharing clinical trial results with these investors a week before those results are made public. So they get sort of an advanced look at the data in exchange for this raising of money. And the way that this is legal, or at least it's legal today, is that in order to do these deals and sort of get this confidential information, the investors are locked up. So essentially, they are not allowed to trade the stock that they acquire until two things happen. One is that that non-public information becomes public, so it's announced. So that has to happen first. And also, these shares are not registered with the SEC. And so until those shares are registered and that registration is accepted by the SEC, then those shares are not tradable. And so that usually happens 30 to 45 days after these deals are closed. So essentially, what's happening is, yes, these funds are getting this, early look at market moving information, but yet they can't actually trade on those data. They can't trade those shares. So that's the legal framework of these deals. And that is why proponents of these deals say that this is not insider trading, that this is completely legitimate. Now there's a lot of pushback on these pipes. I wrote this column today, and my DMs and texts are blowing up. I got to be honest with you. There are a lot of investors out there, and there are a lot of companies out there who just don't think that that these pipes are fair. They wonder about the legality of them, and this is sort of a loophole that no one had ever thought of before. So yes, it may be technically legal, but will the SEC ever crack down on these things? And that's remains to be seen. But, from an issue of fairness, you can see why people would be frustrated and maybe angry about these things, because, you're essentially, even if with these restrictions in place, you're still getting a head start. If you're in a race and somebody, starts early, it's really hard to catch up to the person who has the head start. So it's not a level playing field, and not that, anything on Wall Street or investing is ever fair, right? There's always going to be people who take advantage, have the advantage. And pipes are one of those things. But I think the fact that there were just so many more than, maybe in the past, these were sort of more, they weren't so frequent, and these deals were not so common, but they have become so commonplace. I mean, literally, we're seeing pipe deals done every day. There was another one today. This morning, every morning I'm adding to the spreadsheet of these pipe deals. So I think as they become so more ubiquitous in biotech, the complaints and the concerns about them are growing.
Well, and that's what's interesting, because I understand the sort of win-win framing of it. If you're the company, these pipes are usually priced at higher than the current market value of your stock. So you have a financial interest or a financial incentive to do this rather than the old-fashioned follow-on offering. And then for the hedge funds buying in, there's an obvious enticement, which is that, it's not every day you get to, one, get non-public information, and two, not go to jail for making money on it. That's important. Not going to jail, that is. But I am curious as to, because this reminded me, the last sort of trendy financial instrument that we all bore witness to in biotech and in the market at large was the SPAC. It had its heyday a few years ago, and then it fell away for a multitude of reasons, but the main one being, one, there were too many SPACs, two, there were a lot of low quality SPACs, and three, like everything just kind of fell apart. Like the win-win nature of it went away. And so I wonder, being that Wall Street is a place that is kind of a Me Too area that is prone to following trends and then immediately abandoning them when they go sour, I wonder what might undo the pipe moment. I guess if there were a series of these blinded data pipes, these insider information pipes that where later, once the news was made public, it didn't go the way that perhaps the people buying into the fund thought it would, and that might kind of tank enthusiasm for this. I don't know. How do you think this will bear out even for the rest of 2024 and beyond?
Well, Damien, I think, to your point, going even further back, I mean, you can think about it. The crossover rounds, which was another way that hedge funds made money, right? Hedge funds used to only invest in public companies. Mm-hmm. Then they got the idea of, hey, let's do a crossover round for private companies. And, we do that right before they go public. So that was a way to make money. And then maybe that fell off a little bit. And then, as you mentioned, then it became SPACs. And the SPACs became a way. And then SPACs fell off. And now we have these crossed wall pipes. It's the latest vehicle. Hedge funds will always find a way to get an edge, right, to make more money than they have previously. And so there is, to some extent, these cross-wall pipes are the latest, are the new SPAC, to be pretty simple about it, right? I mean, I think, to be fair, on the other side, I mean, I think there is an element of, this is a way, because the investors who are going into these pipes are generally pretty sophisticated biotech specialist funds, right? And so, it is an idea from a biotech company perspective is not only they're getting money, but they're getting a good base of shareholders, right? They want these funds they want these funds to invest in them. The funds themselves want to be able to sort of dig deep into these companies, maybe get a little bit of material information to make a decision as to sort of whether or not they want to invest. So like you can kind of see where there is a win-win. Where this goes wrong and where it goes off the rails. I mean, I think one of the questions that people ask is how far or how much material information are these companies are funds going to get from companies in order to do these deals, right? What we've seen so far are, clinical trial results. We had one this week where it was a regulatory. It wasn't an approval, but it was an acceptance of an FDA application was sort of the trigger. But what stops a company from bringing investors over the wall about a really big, lucrative pharma partnership, let's say? What stops them from, sharing earnings ahead of time? What stops them from sharing? How about an acquisition? How about if a company is about to be acquired or is sort of entering into a sale process? Would you take investors over the wall to raise money to sort of help bolster your negotiating position when it comes to negotiating a takeout? These are all, it's sort of like there seems to be sort of no limit right now in terms of what kind of information can be shared under these pipe arrangements. And I think that's what has people concerned. So that may be something where if it gets a little bit crazy, the regulators step in. And the other thing is that, as I mentioned in the story, Wall Street has this sort of chronic habit of just going too far, and getting fat, lazy, and stupid when they find a new way to make money. And so there inevitably would be a time where maybe like there are shortcuts taken. There are ways to, like I mentioned, all of these restrictions, but there are, I talked to someone who's really experienced in pipes. And, there are ways to trade around those restrictions. There's ways to use options. Funds could use these pipes to cover shorts that they're losing shorts positions. There are different ways that, you can do things that maybe to sort of goose your returns that maybe are not exactly kosher, and those are the kind of things that may kind of bring this to an end. I mean, for now, I think we're going to see more of these, and again, I have heard from some large institutional investors that hate these deals. They think that they're not legal, and they refuse to do them. And I've talked to even some smaller hedge funds that feel the same way. They're just not comfortable from a compliance and legal framework that these deals are kosher, and that they have not done them. But at the same time, what's interesting is that those funds are worried because if they don't do these deals, are they losing a competitive edge against the funds that do them? Because right now these funds are, these deals are working for the hedge funds and the investors who do them, right? So you obviously sort of benchmark yourself against your peers, and if you are you at a disadvantage by not participating in these pipes? So, it's a fascinating topic, and one that I wrote this long piece today in Stat, and you should read it. I hope you will read it, and I think that this is something that I'm going to be following for a while because I think that it's going to evolve, and there's a lot more to say about it.
Well, we are looking forward to talking about it more. It does feel like the 2024 version of SPAC. Also, I mean, for me, the vestiges of SPACs, because those were the first contexts in which I ever heard about pipes, certainly feels like it has the potential to like uphold that hot and cold trendiness of the SPAC. So Adam, keep us posted.
And Allison, as you know, like getting into like crossover, you think about it, right? Yeah. Because you know this, because you dig deep into the private world, right? Like, private companies used to be just funded by venture capitalists, right? And it was always them. And then it was, a lot of these funds didn't sort of enter into the conversation until the IPO. And then, it all sort of morphed into one, right? Where these crossover rounds became dominated by hedge funds that typically invest in public equities, because that was a way for them to basically generate a greater return on their investment.
Oh, absolutely. All of the lines have blurred.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I like that the quest for free money on Wall Street has now matriculated into micro-dosing insider trading. And I'm sure, how could that possibly go wrong? Also, we talked about this, the blinded data pipe phenomenon as it began. I guess that was last year, maybe even a year and a half ago. Right. Which now, whenever I see it, I don't remember which of you did this, but somebody put in my mind that the phrase blinded data pipe fits directly into the chorus of Blinded by the Light by Bruce Springsteen. And so now, even reading your story today, Adam, I just have that kind of reverberating through my mind. So that's at least one benefit.
Blinded by the pipe. We should come up with some more lyrics. Maybe for next week's show, we'll have a whole song.
Look, I keep on joking about us doing a biotech version of We Are the World, so this is our opportunity.
Yeah, there you go. And that does it for another episode of the Readout Loud.
Thank you to Teresa Gaffney for producing this week's episode.
Our senior producers are Hyacinth Empanato and Alyssa Ambrose. Our executive producer is Rick Burke, and our theme music is by Brian Joel.
And we'd love to hear from you. Tell us what you like about this week's episode, what you didn't like, and your thoughts on pipes. You can do all that by sending us an email at readoutloud@statnews.com.
And if you like what we do, leave a review or a rating on Apple Podcasts or whichever platform you use to get your podcasts.
See you next week.
Guys, we went 25 minutes.
Well, you have to remember that the first 6 or so of that, at least on my recording, is deep consideration of like Amy Adams' career or something like that. So